Hey everyone, I'm going to try this one more time. Um, this is the third time I did this Facebook Live because my headphones gave out twice last week. So I wanted to try this again. This is Rebecca Snow. I am owner and of the Nutrition and Herbal Collective. I'm a mentor and CNS supervisor here at the collective, and we do regular education monthly on our Facebook page and on our resource hub on our website, nutritionherbalcollective.com. Today we're talking about signs and symptoms. When I first started practicing clinically, I could not order lab tests. And so I needed to do a really good history taking. Signs and symptoms were really important clues as to what my client needed nutritionally and herbally. So I think it's a really important tool to be curious, to be detectives, to dig in, to understand what's going on. What is a client's experience of something? So that's what we're going to talk about, signs and symptoms. First and foremost, just be curious. Maybe you don't even know what information you're going to find, but there is infinite possibilities of what a line of questions can lead to for a client. I'm thinking about a client that I had who had lost her eyesight, and when I was asking into associative factors and mediators, it came out that there was an abusive relationship in their life and they took effective action. That wasn't really what I was expecting when we dug into what was going on at the time that this started, and that's what came out. But that was a facilitated change in that person's life, right? So sometimes by being an observer to what's showing up in somebody's life, really we facilitate reflection for that individual. So in the conversation, just that hour and a half the client has to reflect on their health history, they actually learn things themselves by putting the pieces together and seeing it in a new light, or seeing it in a light from somebody else's viewpoint. As we reflect back to our client or our patient what we're seeing, they see it in a new light. So just be curious. The act of asking questions and giving your patient the space to discuss what's going on for themselves is a gift and can bring about aha moments about their health. So that's first and foremost. The other thing is, don't take diseases at face value. When somebody says IBS, first of all, that's kind of like a bucket diagnosis, and there's many ways that can show up. There are, there's IBS-C, IBS-D, but there's also just even within those subcategories, it can show up differently for different people. So a great question is, how does IBS show up for you, or what's your experience of that? And there's many diagnoses where the diagnosis only tells us so much. I mean, we really need a fleshed out experience of what that is for the person. Another way to ask that is, what does insomnia feel like in your body, or what does anxiety feel like in your body? Because, we can assume that maybe their heart rate goes up or they feel cold and clammy, but maybe that's not how they experience it. And another important differential here is, let's say somebody reacts to a food. I eat eggs and I react to them. But to say that one reacts to them, that's the story. The story is you've reacted. What is the reaction? That's not really a phenomenological explanation of what happened. So, and we're not doubting that they had a reaction. It's more that understanding what the experience of the client is will give you more information. What does that reaction look like for you? Did you get constipated? Did you break out in a rash? Did you feel anxious? Did your heart speed up? Also, it can be helpful too to try and understand a little bit more in the realm of food intolerances. Like, is this an allergy? Is this, an IgE mediated allergy? Do they need to be referred out to an allergist, or is this more of a food intolerance sensitivity that could be handled nutritionally? So by digging into what the reaction is, we get a better sense. Is this within my scope to work with? And do I have the tools needed to help them with this as a nutritionist? Yeah, so diagnosis is helpful because it gives people a story to operate under, and people get treatment, they get insurance coverage, they get directed to the right providers. It can provide a context of understanding, but a diagnosis can also be a bit of a jail sentence. It can lead to depression, like particularly the diagnosis of infertility, can trigger mood issues. It may not lead to treatment. It's possible that diagnosis doesn't have treatment. So yeah, diagnosis is definitely a double-edged sword, and we're not in the business of diagnosing. We're in the business of personalized nutrition, which is individualizing nutritional plans, and that does account for the diagnosis, but we can go deeper than that even by understanding more about what's showing up, signs and symptoms. Now, once you've identified a symptom, such as a headache or heart palpitations, difficulty falling asleep, maybe it takes them 2 hours to fall asleep at night. These are all specific phenomenological experiences that the client's having, right? Then my favorite tool at this point is to use the 7 qualities of a symptom to dig in a little bit more, so, and this is a great thing to have in a sticky note on your computer or a little 3x5 card. Can be super helpful just to remind yourself what questions to ask once you've gotten down to that headache or that symptom, i.e. headache. So number 1, location. So where is the headache? Where do you feel it in your body? And they can point, is it frontotemporal? Is it occipital? Like, where in the head are they feeling it? Maybe it's one-sided. So understanding where it is, what's the quality? Do you feel sensitive to light when it's happening? Is it a throbbing? Does it get worse when you lean over, which could be a sign of a sinus headache when you get that like throbbing sensation when you lean over? Maybe it starts in the back of the neck and it moves up. So maybe maybe that comes more on at the end of the workday after one's been sitting at the computer all day, or more on the weekends. Maybe there's a work schedule component to it or a structural component to it. And maybe it moves, maybe it's, and also with quality, you can ask, is it sharp or dull? What's the nature of the symptom? Does it feel like a knife is, cutting in your head? Does it feel kind of diffuse and very generalized? So what's the quality of the headache? So quality is also a good one with pain, particularly, menstrual pain or nerve pain. You can really get into the quality of that. Quantity or severity could be how often is it happening, or, and what's the level of the intensity of the symptoms. So again, for a headache, how painful is that headache, 1 to 10? How often are you having these headaches? And that's a great way to track progress too, because if somebody's having migraine headaches twice a week, which is a lot, you can check in with them how frequently they're having them, or the prodromal symptoms leading up to kind of, or just, those initial symptoms that they're getting a migraine. So you can identify that as well. And then for timing, that could be time of day, time of week, season, time of the month, um, or maybe the timing in relationship to other events in one's life. So maybe like after bike rides, but that's more of kind of an associated factor. So timing, are the headaches correlated with menstrual cycle? Are they happening at ovulation or, at bleeding time? When maybe there's a nutritional component, maybe they're mildly anemic or majorly anemic. So maybe there's a correlation there. Maybe there's a correlation with the fluctuation in estrogen 3 days before the cycle, and that's triggering some migraine type symptoms. And then there's circumstances, or setting. Like maybe the symptoms only come up when they're at work, or maybe it shows up at home. Maybe there's an environmental factor related to it. If it shows up only at a certain building, or maybe it shows up upon traveling. So there's maybe the diet changes around those circumstances. Like if they're traveling, they're eating different, or there could be like maybe mold in a building or a sick building. So what's the setting and circumstances? And then remitting and exacerbating factors. So basically what makes it better, what makes it worse? It may seem silly to ask that, but somebody might not actually, again, you're providing the opportunity for reflection. So, for instance, ameliorating factors like when you hydrate, does it make the headache better? Or if you put a cold cloth, does that make it better? Does pressure on the head make it feel better? Does massage make it feel better or worse? So what are things that improve it or make it worse? Hot or cold cloth, maybe hydration, food, lack of food, etc. And again, by asking all these questions, you do help them kind of figure out how to best help themselves as well, just by knowing how they can improve or worsen their symptoms. And then you also get to identify, if a hot cloth makes it a headache better, then, improving circulation might benefit, and circulatory stimulant herbs like ginger and rosemary might be helpful. And if, eating out at dinner makes it worse, it's possible that super salty foods or MSG might be a trigger. So you can start to identify these factors. And at first they might just be a question mark, but then as you gather more data, you might confirm a hypothesis. Maybe they get headaches when they eat at Chinese restaurants. There's more MSG. Maybe they also get it after Diet Coke. So maybe there's something with, free glutamate triggering headaches. So you educate them about that and you move forward with that hypothesis in your plan to see if it helps them get better or helps them reduce their headaches. Associated manifestations or factors. This would kind of be like what I was saying earlier with the example with losing sight. What was going on at that time? When this symptom began, what else was going on in your life? Or was there anything that, and you can talk about like, so this happened, this started in 2020. What else was going on at that time? Was started the pandemic, maybe they lost a family member, and understand a bit what the triggers are or mediators are around that. Or, whenever I get a headache, I also get loose stools. So there's a correlation there with another symptom. So that helps you identify, and which came first. And then you dig in more. And so sometimes doing the 7 qualities of a symptom, you actually get more questions and answers, but that's okay. And you can also dig in. You don't have to dig in on the first visit. You can wait till the second or third visit, just depending on how much you have to talk about. Maybe there's a lot of labs to go over. Maybe there's a huge diet history and weight history to go through, and there's just not time to dig into headaches or IBS or other symptoms that are showing up on the MSQ or your health history. And that's okay, you can table it for later. I'm happy to talk to you more about how I use this tool. You can check out our resource hub, nutritionherbalcollective.com. And again, this is Rebecca Snow. Thanks for listening. Bye.